Welcome back to Neon Galactic, a YouTube podcast produced by PBS affiliate Keat TV in Eureka, California. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Humanity has long been the master of tools. Part of what differentiates us from other creatures on this planet is our innate and often ingenious ability to adapt the world to our designs, physically, intellectually, even spiritually. One of the great projects of this or any era is to determine what our place in the cosmos actually is and how our vital energies form a powerful part of the conscious universe. Who are we? What are we? Why? Until we understand how our nature fits within the broader scheme of mind, matter, and energy, we're doomed to only guess at potentialities and be forever on the hunt for intrinsic meaning. How do we know what matters if we don't even know ourselves? Our guest tonight is a well-known figure in the occult and musical worlds, a man who actually works to explicate and explore otherworldly technologies that enable an even deeper manipulation of realities, magic. Through a lifelong study of the Western esoteric tradition and Aleister Crowley's Thelema, Marco Visconti is working to educate his students on the mysteries of the universe and of themselves. And he's here today to help us understand and explore these topics and perhaps gain a glimpse of realities long ignored or even ridiculed by the broader culture. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Great start, right? With an introduction like that, what could possibly go wrong?
I'm fascinated by your life and your expertise and your career. So let's start with how you ended up studying the Western esoteric tradition and what brought you into sort of being so interested and passionate about magic.
So it all started already when I was very young, I must have been 12 at the time. It was 1990, so I was 12. Up until the time, I was already interested in mythology, in folklore. But it was the summer of 1990 that, by a complete, synchronicity, a chance, if you want, I discovered the figure of Aleister Crowley in a comic book. This comic book is a rather famous comic book in Italy called Martin Mister. And the guy himself, the Martin Mister character is himself, imagine like an esoteric Indiana Jones, right? Like kind of adventurer, but he really he focuses on magic and the like. And the point is that in the special, so every year, do you remember, comics, like every year they used to have summer specials, right? A specific long form issue. There was an addendum to that issue. It was called The Most Mysterious Man in the World, and that most mysterious man, one of those most mysterious men was Aleister Crowley, which kind of captivated me immediately, because I was already on a personal path to become like a goth, a metalhead. So I still really, I was attracted to something that was left of center already, and of course Aleister Crowley at the time was still very much presented in the same way that had been presented since its rediscovery in the 60s, and that is a maverick, a savant, but somebody was really very much into an hedonistic lifestyle, but also someone who was very much going to try and figure out everything that was mysterious and was prohibited. Another thing that I would like to mention, even if I was not raised in a strict religious family, it's almost impossible to escape the yoke of the Catholic Church and the Vatican, especially if you're born in Rome, as I do. So, but it's so it's so enmeshed in our culture that even if I wasn't forced to go to to church and to mass every Sunday, I was going to a Jesuit school, right? And I was exposed to that. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't hate it, and I never really hated it, but I felt there must be something else. There must be another way of doing it. I didn't like this, and I still don't like to this day, the very strict pyramidal, top heavy, hierarchical structure where somebody is at the top and kind of dictate the law for everybody else. I really wanted to see if there was a possibility to explore alternatives to that. And Crowley Crowley was that compared to the the status quo of his time. But then, of course, in time, I ended up realizing, as I was studying Crowley and I was going deeper into Crowley and deeper into Thelema, that Crowley himself was very much like somebody who really believed in hierarchies. The only thing is that he wanted himself at the top, as opposed of the king or the pope or whoever else.
Yeah.
And in fact, over time, now we're really moving across the time wave from 1990 up until 2018. In 2018, so me, Marco 12 years old, Marco 40 years old, that's what led me to leave Ordo Templi Orientis, after being very involved into it for a while here in London, because I realized that that top heavy hierarchical structure, it was still very much embedded in in that order, in that organization. And it didn't work for me, really. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to pursue a Thelema that is more, that basically empowers the individual so that the individual can function not as an island, as a member of a community, as a member of a complex social structure, but without bowing down to the whims of anyone else. So just this is what really got me into Thelema. And then honestly, I realized that it was helping me, right? You started very correctly stating that there might be a technology of the soul, a technology of the spiritual, right? And that magic with the K, I would say, which is magic with the K. It's not just a fancy spelling of magic. Crowley wanted it. He famously wrote in Liber ABA, Magic in Theory and Practice. He wrote that he wanted to basically enshrine magic again as a term, because it had been basically despised and reviled for so many years. And he wanted to make sure that people understood that by adding the K, he was not just talking about sleight of hand or illusion, parlor tricks or whatnot. But the truth of the matter here is also that K has various implications. That we could discuss it later if you want. But at the end of the day, when we speak of magic, and when I speak of magic, when I use this term, I use it really to pinpoint, to speak about a very unique mixture of Western and Eastern techniques, spiritual techniques. So of course you would have what most people would most think about magic when they think about it. So maybe imagine like conjuring spirits with a circle, using ceremonial tools, going through rituals, very elaborate ceremonial rituals of initiation, but also, and it's a very important part of it actually, bringing in all sorts of techniques that maybe in our contemporary world are considered more maybe mundane, because they became mainstream. And I'm talking about yoga, really. I'm talking about all yogic techniques, from pranayama to pratyahara, dharana, and all focused towards realizing samadhi, that is the union with the divine. And this union with the divine really is one of the two fundamental steps in Thelema. The first is this union with the divine, which is also defined with a technical term, which is knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel. And then, in fact, there is the second step, which is the more advanced one, the more complex one, which is titled the crossing of the abyss, which kind of means like, you first obtain the union, which is difficult on its own, and then you work to realize that even that union is illusory. So even that unification is illusory. And in fact, the ontological truth of all existence is the dispersion into nothingness. Again, at the time when Crowley was writing these things, so early 1900s, up until, he died in 1947. So let's say the first 40 years of the 1900s, all these ideas were relatively new, especially as he was writing for the mainstream, quote unquote, of his time. Of course, nowadays we are more aware of things like transcendental meditation, shunyata meditation, the void meditation, all these things that eventually, possibly because Crowley was one of the pioneers that went to try and discover what was hidden in the East and possibly filtered to the West over centuries and maybe even millennia. So Crowley was one of the pioneers, and then others after him went back. And as as the world became more global and more interconnected, lo and behold, now we have access to those techniques. And maybe in many ways, we realize how pioneers like Crowley were from time to time just cobbling together what they could at best. So long story short, what I'm trying to do right now is to present Thelema being faithful to Crowley's vision as much as possible. I think that some of these things, some of his vision could be maybe a little bit outdated and should be upgraded, but at the same time also showing up where certain ideas come from, so that people can decide, like I want to do this into the Thelemic framework. This is what works for me, or maybe actually I want to go deeper into yoga, deeper into tantra. I want to go to those sources, right? Because now we can, right? Now we can have access to that. In my book, I wrote, for instance, like, first of all, those since we haven't mentioned it, I wrote a book a year ago. This is my first book, called the Aleister Crowley Manual, Thelemic Magick for Modern Times, and I wrote it specifically with like trying to be as basic and clear and simple as possible. Like I, as you can imagine, I got some flack for doing that, because the magical community, the esoteric community, the occult community, it's very much made of either actual specialists or faux specialists, and everybody wants to, almost like they always want to talk to each other about the same things again and again. And so every time you try to bring in something that might be seen as a simplification, they kind of like react badly, because now they will in their minds we always need the more difficult thing, the more flowery language, the more complex ritual. Where what I want to do, I want everybody to pick up this book, read it, and at least have a general idea. Okay, this is what it is. These are the practices. Of course, as I put it very clearly in my book, the practices that I present there are for the absolute beginners. Like imagine like elementary school level, right? Even if Thelema itself lends to be like, it lends itself to be very complex, in fact. And I make the point again in the book that, when we get to the more specific Thelemic rituals, where as I write in book, well, so I can talk about a little bit about these rituals, but they're not for you, like my dear reader, right? Maybe come back next in a few years after you have digested and practiced everything we've done so far. But that is my aim, trying to present these ideas in the most clear and simple language as possible. Like literally, the book is written for somebody who has never heard about magic. Maybe they've heard about Crowley, and so they see the name, okay, let's see what it's about, and they can understand it. And it can be something that can be put into practice immediately. Because another point that I always like to make, and I do this a lot with my students, I run classes online.
And magic without tears and other things, right? You did the Stairway to Heaven thing with Peter Lebenda, and
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
So,
and in fact, it's been, all these courses online were born of the pandemic, of the lockdown years, right? It's something like, we had a lot of time, we didn't know what to do. And, at first it was just a Patreon, and then it evolved into something else, like, because I kind of wanted to leave the idea of the community behind, and focus, okay, no, we're here. We come together to study every week, to do the practices, but then everybody goes their separate ways, especially because, again, the world is open again now. We really don't need to be clinically and chronically online all the time, right? It's good to reconnect with the outside world. I think it's actually also, it helps with our mental health as well. But, like one thing that I always like to tell my students is that you can have, you can start this your own magical path, but pretty quick you should ask yourself, is this something I love? Is this something I enjoy doing or not? Like, it's not like the doctor prescribed you magic, right? And I'm telling you this because it could be that people pick up the book or watch something online, because there's many people there's a lot of very good material online as well for free, to be fair.
Sure.
Some I put it out myself, some that we live in the age of information, right? So it's
Hmm.
there's a lot of good there, there's a lot of bad there. Maybe it's harder than ever now to sift through the good and the bad, but there is a lot of good stuff out there. So
Yeah.
people could maybe just decide to start their own practice, but then, down the line, maybe a month in, 2 months in, 6 months in, I always like to say, you should give yourself 6 months to see if, these practices, these ideas produce any positive effect in your life, as they should. But after that, if it's not for you, it's not for you.
Yeah.
You can and you should move on. And I found myself. For me, this has always been obvious, possibly because for me it's something that every time I engage with this practice, and it's been almost over 30 years now. I always find myself that I love them. I want to do more, and I want to do more.
Yeah.
And in fact, you have to get to learn also to balance yourself, because you're unless you decide to live the life of I don't know, of a magical monk, you have to go around where you have to work, you have to have your social connections, your partner, your family, your kids, if you have any, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe unless you decide to to retreat yourself from life and just only do magic, well, you have to allocate the right amount of time to it. But it could well be that at some point you just don't love it, right?
Yeah.
And the good
Absolutely.
news is, yeah, and the good news is that you can just move on to, and maybe find something if you still feel that need to discover what's more than just whatever we see around us. Famously, in Sanskrit it's called Maya, that is illusion, the veil of illusion, the dream that we live while waking, right? If you really want to wake up, you can do it. I mean, I would say maybe you should do it. But then again, we live in times where there is a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of pressure, social pressure, and like we have all to wake up, because I mean, of course, it has been heavily politicized as a message. It has been heavily weaponized as a message, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important, but at the same time, it might well not be what you need to do in this life. Maybe in this life, all you have to do is to live a good life with your family, with your loves, and that's about it. Because, waking up is traumatic.
Yeah.
It does bring some sort of instability in your life, but it's the kind of instability you are inviting so that you can shed your old skin and be reborn anew. It really is a sort of metamorphosis. And
Yeah.
I remember, like, I'm as you can, I think it's obvious, I'm much more somebody who's interested in literature, music, and art than proper science. But I always remember how fascinating it was when I was studying biology and realizing that when an insect goes into a cocoon to metamorphosize, well, what happened there? It's like literally it's not that something changed, like I know they grow wings or things like that. No, no, no. Like basically they become almost liquid, and from that
Hmm.
liquid they reform everything.
Yeah.
That's what happens. I mean, this is what magic will do to you if done properly, and if done properly over several years, and if done properly over several years with proper tutorship as well.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's also very important. I like to use another metaphor, and that is like the going to the gym, right? Like you
Hmm.
can go to the gym if you feel like you need to be in shape. I definitely need to go back. It's been like, let's say
Me
it's been
too.
some time now, but it's in my it's on my head, on my mind. So you can go, right, and do up and just try out and see what happens. But the reality is that if you want to go serious about it, and if you want to avoid hurting yourself, you need at some point having like a personal trainer. Maybe not
Yeah.
forever, but for a period of time, so you understand, I don't know, how the weights work, or how the muscles work, or how to train the muscles, how not to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Really is the same with magic, right?
Yeah.
And especially in the last 5 6 years, from 2018 onwards, and of course there was a huge spike during the lockdowns, because of course we had all of us, we had more time. There's been almost like this new magical revival, and magical
Yeah.
revivals are chronic. They always come back. There's always been. In my lifetime, I remember three. like the late 90s, and then the late 2000s, and then again basically between 2018 up until, well, it's dying now, it's dissipating now. So in my life I lived three.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that, like, when I speak with people that are older than me, with Peter Levenda, for instance, like he remembers the 70s, he remembers the 80s, etc. It's almost
Yeah.
like every 10 years, more or less, they come back. Like maybe it can skip, maybe it's a bit longer, a bit shorter, but in general, it comes back.
Yeah.
And what happened, of course, in recent years, that this was the first time, though, that we also had access to social media, to
Yeah.
podcasts, to YouTube videos, to Telegram groups, etc., etc., etc. So we had immense, like, an exponential burst of interest, but also, like I was saying earlier on, it's so much more difficult right now to differentiate between good information, bad information, good teachers, bad teachers. I will be honest with you, there are not many bad teachers, but there are some.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of misinformation, like a lot of it. And
Yeah.
so it's difficult to navigate. But I personally think it's rewarding if you decide that that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I went places. I sorry for the rambling, but I hope.
Yeah. No, no, that's great. It's fantastic. Whatever you want to talk about, that's what I want to talk about. But so let me back up a little bit. Like you mentioned that there are different technologies, right? Like there's Thelema, and then there's also yoga, and there's, lots of different traditions. My question to you is, what is your sense of the underlying reality? Like if you had to strip away all of the various schools and the terminology that we're all used to, and you were trying to explain to someone who doesn't have the background, I mean, and a lot of my audience probably would, but just to get it more, broadly, associating with what we typically live with, what would you say is the reality behind what magic is and what it does, and how are we able to tap into it no matter what technology we're using?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Of course, I mean, I'm gonna preface this by saying that this is my perspective, like this is
Of
my
course.
opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not gonna say that this is the truth. I would
Hmm.
say this is my truth, right? This is how
Yeah.
I perceived it, right?
Yeah.
I think that at the core of this big game that we're playing, we call this game life, right? And so
Yeah.
to understand the secret of life, we have to possibly understand that life, of course, doesn't end with us, right? Like we as incarnated beings, we are here for a period of time, and I feel like our goal here is to try and experience the life we're given to the nth level. Okay, so as deep as possible. This means, of course, I'm already hearing people saying, well, it's very easy for you to say that because you are, a white middle-aged man that comes, from a middle-class background. You don't live in a war zone, etc., etc. Yeah, absolutely, I get it. I get it that I speak from a position of extreme privilege. However, I think that the human experience is about learning to live through this life as much as possible, like experiencing, tasting it, enjoying it or hating it in many ways, like not being a lot of spiritual gurus, a lot of spiritual talking heads always try to frame it as a positive way. It doesn't have to be positive. Like I really think that we are constantly faced with polarities and the idea of duality. And in fact, we should engage with both of them, right? In fact, we should engage with love as much as we should engage with hatred. Always trying to strive to the middle point, though. Not getting lost into loving everything for the sake of it, because of course then it would become foolishness. I think because you would end up loving blindly people that don't love you back or are ill intent about against you, or at the same time not become a hater of everything, because again you just make the other error.
Yeah.
However, this is only to say about the human experience. I think that magic itself, and in general, by magic, let's say I'm using this term as an umbrella term here, so
Yeah.
will teach you that all of this is still transitory. Like you tend to identify yourself with Marco, with James, with whoever, because of course we only have one life, as Marco, as James, as whatever. And
Mhm.
whenever you hear people that think of remember, they remember different lifetimes, right? Most of the time they remember lifetimes from the past. Some people will say that they remember lifetimes from the future as well, right? Compared to, or at least it seems the future because it's so much more technologically advanced than what we are right now, and
Yeah.
we try to think that it must be from the future. Well, there at the same time, even if you remember these things, at the end of the day, what you remember really are the same idea, the same thing as seen from a movie, right? So yes, maybe you identified very much with that character in the movie, but at the same time, maybe how can you say it's you, right? Because it's just a memory. So what I'm saying is that when you put all these things together, so experiencing life to the fullest, realizing that there might be other lifetimes out there, other strands of life, lifetimes as well that you might remember, you might have lived. At the same time, when you strip all of this, all these onion peels away, what remains is the essence of reality itself, which is what I call the divine, the Godhead. Okay, so in our core there is this Godhead, this divine spark, and magic allows you to unite with it. Okay, and
Yeah.
so by doing that, you it's not so much that you find your purpose, but by doing that, by fully achieving this unification, almost like you set yourself right now, right here and right now, onto the route that you're meant to go through into this life. And so experiencing life will become easier. This is not to say that everything will become easier. Like, oh, once I've done that, I become like a superhero. Everything is great. Everything is fine. I left suffering behind. No, it's more like you will understand perfectly at any point that maybe even the suffering you go through, it's something that you're meant to experience in this lifetime. Because at the end of the day, and this is what might become a little bit hard to swallow for many, you, James, Marco, don't really exist. What
Yeah.
truly exists, it's that in that core that you have, that divine core that you have connected with. So in many ways, this is similar to what the Stoic, but similar, but not the same, what the Stoic would call amor fati, again, Latin, which is, love for one's fate, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit more agency to that in the sense that I really don't believe in a fate that, once you discovered it's impossible to move. What I think is that, like, by becoming in union with that divine core at the center of your soul, if you want, right?
Sure.
Then you can see clearly your full time wave, and at that point you can decide, okay, this is coming my way, and I will accept it, and I actually will prepare for it, right? And I will endure it to the best of my abilities. At the same time, every time that there will be a positive experience coming your way, you will enjoy it twice as much because you will know that, well, this is one of the times in my life where I will get to be happy. So instead of just like, yeah, whatever, like I will actually throw myself into it.
Yeah.
And, for instance, in my experience, this meant that love becomes stronger, affection becomes stronger, passion becomes stronger, the love to just see the world around you and the appreciation of it becomes stronger. Your days become brighter because you just decide to live. You just like it's only just you decide you live your life to the fullest all the time. So this is what all this game is all about.
And how does it relate to the Godhead? I know that some people think that like we're sort of, I mean, filaments of the divine, and that we're sent out into the universe to sort of experience the manifestation of the universe. And as that, we are portions of the Godhead, informing the Godhead about His own
Mhm.
creation, giving him a
Yeah,
sense of how to taste it, his own sensory,
appendices,
apparatus.
if you want. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
apparatus. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Is that sort of what you think also,
Yeah,
or
in many ways,
yeah,
I think that's it. And in Thelema in particular, rose as not so much like in contrast with Christianity, even if Crowley was very much like a polemic of Christianity, right? But the idea was like it rose in contrast to all sorts of restrictionism possible. So of course, in monotheist religions, Abrahamic religions in general, they are very restrictive, prescriptive, etc., etc. Whereby Thelema wants to be more open and wants to teach everybody to, don't, don't avoid doing things as long as you do them in according with your true will, which it's something that you got to discover first. It's not something you start with, and of course, the true will or pure will in Thelema is not the whims, it's not the wants. You have to go into this process of stripping all the unnecessary layers to go to that core that we were discussing first. But once you've done that, well, lo and behold, you are going to basically not, let's say, you're not going to feel any shame or any guilt if you want to enjoy things that maybe society see them as unacceptable. On that note, I should also say, because there's a philosophical conundrum here. Well, what do you mean society is not acceptable? Do you mean that, I don't know, pedophilia is fine or murder is fine? Of course, that is not fine, because those ideas impinge on the free will of someone else. Murder impinge on the will to live of someone else, whereby rape of any kind or abuse of any kind impinge on the will of other people to just live free and not oppressed. So obviously, it cannot be that, like, it's not. Thelema has been often confused with a might is right philosophy, and a lot of people, I mean, even Thelemites have made that. But I will be honest with you. One of my ongoing sides of my work is to expose all the far right figureheads in Thelema, and there are many, and there's been even more in the recent years, because it's so easy to take everything I said and just like conflate it with might is right. Like, you discover your true will. You discover your Godhead, you have that tether with the Godhead, so you can do whatever you want. No, that's not it, because, everybody, even those who have not discovered their true will, have an instinctual right to discover it. And once they do, we all have the will to live. That's a given, right? So, and there's no way that, somebody, there's no way that anybody wants to be abused to a level of where they don't enjoy it. Now, of course, this opens the idea of alternative sex relationship, where maybe people do enjoy some sort of abuse and some sort of I'm talking about BDSM, especially the SM submission part of the equation, domination submission of the equation. But of course, we're not. That's something between consensual adults, and something else is completely between those people that cannot consent. Okay.
Yeah.
So that I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, basically, exercising your true will and living in freedom, as long as you're exercising of your will or the living in that freedom doesn't impinge upon anybody other's ability to do the same. It's like a collective seeking that allows for everyone to exist and to flower in that process without curtailing anybody or abusing anybody or causing anyone harm.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Like in Thelema, there's this idea that every man and every woman is a star. And the point is that every man and every woman has that indefeasible right to discover their own stardom. Okay. And so up until they haven't done that, they should be left alone, really. They should be left to their own devices so that they discover it. And once they do, well, when we look at the stars, we know as a fact that stars tend to be, I mean, in Crowley's time, he thought that all stars were in perfect equilibrium with each other. Now we do know that black holes exist and stars from time to time collapse. And I think that could be seen also in the idea that even initiation can fail. Even people that reach that initiatory stage where they are in contact with their own true will or pure will, that is the Holy Guardian Angel, And by the way, I should say the Holy Guardian Angel in Thelema is not an angel. It's not like, and angels are a category of spirits that can be contacted, but the Holy Guardian Angel, it's more like, it's a fancy term that Crowley used it because he literally said, "Oh, I'm going to use this term because nobody ever is going to create like serious philosophical systems about it." Lo and behold, 100 years later, we're still debating about the nature of the Holy Guardian Angel. My next book will be all about the Holy Guardian Angel. So I'm writing about it these days, and I'm realizing that, yeah, I mean, Crowley really didn't got it right, that one, right? But the point is that the Holy Guardian Angel really is the Godhead, like that feather with the Godhead.
Yeah.
And so um, it could be that even people that got to that stage, eventually they might fall from that point, right?
Yeah.
They might collapse into themselves. So that's possibly how if we want to keep using the metaphor of stars in perfect harmony with each other, that's how we can allow for the idea of black holes, because
Yeah.
sadly it is possible that people fall from that stage.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I hear a lot in all the things I'm talking about similarities between the cosmic outside, in terms of, I guess it's another example of as above, so below, but
Yeah.
basically, like Crowley talks about each of us being our own star. And I know that a lot of traditions thought that upon death, we ascend to the
Hmm.
celestial sphere and live among the stars.
Yep.
And I find that beautiful and fascinating. One question I had for you that I've asked other people before, but I'd like to hear your take on it, is that some people ascribe basically selfish motivations to magic, that you can pursue spiritual practices trying to find unification with the universe or the Godhead, or to get to know yourself better, acquaint yourself with your higher self, or experience the observer or witness within ourselves, that kernel of awareness that is, I think, our soul, or at least one way of encountering our soul. But I mean, the idea that to do it to impact reality or to change things to your benefit is somehow intrinsically selfish. Can you dispose of that argument for me? I mean,
I can
it's not,
try.
yeah. I mean, is it inherently selfish to try and affect the world so that your own existence is more comfortable, or to help other people? Where do you see that falling out?
I mean, I think that this is one of the, of the lingering effects of 2000 years of Christian morals and Christian ethics,
There
right?
you go. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, in the sense that we've been told that, we were born in sin, and only through the life and death of someone else, not us, the true Son of God, we can only be saved. And, in many ways, there's a lot of beauty in that story, because it kind of puts you on the back seat. As long as you do as you're told, and as long as you follow the rules as you're told, and as long as you're modest, you're good, right? You're done. Somebody like a Superman has come and saved you,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Totally.
Well, Thelema rather tells you that nobody's coming to save you, because you don't need to be saved from anything. There's no original sin. There's no sin. There's no guilt. There's
Yeah,
just like life and the enjoyment of life. Now, how do you try and find that the correct balance, however, between the overindulgence, that usually comes when you find yourself free from everything, especially think of anybody who's been, born and raised into very strict religious communities. I'm not just talking about Christianity. I'm talking about pretty much every major religion can be very prescriptive.
sure.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
they tend to go on the complete opposite, right? They tend to overindulge, right? And
yeah,
overindulgement of any kind can be, and often is, completely selfish, right? To the point that, your pleasure and your interests go and become the detriment of others. I mean, I feel that we live in times where we see this all around us, because like we live in times where sadly, the 70 years of relative peace and prosperity that we in the West experience are gone. And now we see that sort of overindulgence done by the ultra rich, that they're taking everything for themselves, right? That's a clear example from it to me, of this thing you were mentioning.
yeah,
Well, I would say that if you're a magician, if you're aspiring to be a magician, the first thing you must understand, again, that there's no sin, there is no guilt. You should not feel ashamed of your needs, especially if you come from a very modest background and you want to better yourself. There's nothing wrong in using magic to do so. In many ways, that stage of initiation that we describe as the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, if we were to map it somewhere on, and if we were to use as a map the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life,
Hmm.
well, this would happen in the middle point, right? This is the Sephira called Tiferet, and Tiferet means beauty.
Yeah.
And Tiferet is the place of harmony, right? It's the perfect place. It's the middle of this map. It's perfectly in balance from all places, up and down, left and right. It's in the middle. Well, the Sephira of Tiferet is also connected with the planetary energy of the sun. Okay, and what does the sun does? Really, think about it. Think the sun. It's the center of the solar system. Is pretty much the protagonist of the solar system, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It projects light. It gives life to all the planets, etc., etc. If we move now from an astronomical landscape onto a mythical landscape, think of all the gods of the sun. You have Helios, you have Apollo. In general, you have gods that are very, I don't want to say full of themselves, but they're very proud. Because they're powerful,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the kind of selfishness that you must achieve. You cannot start, telling you that you don't need that because you're too scared of becoming too selfish. You have to experience that. In many ways, Thelema, but I would say any magical system that pushes you towards this stage of enlightenment and attainment, well, they push you also at some point to become the hero of your journey. You must become your own savior and understand again that there's nothing to be saved for. So in many ways, there's nothing bad into bettering yourself. But the point is that the moment you do that, you also have to remember that as a sun, it's so easy to turn those beneficial rays into scorching rays of destruction. And it's so easy to, keep projecting at the expense of others. Again, which is what I think we are experiencing right now in our society. Because some of these people that went on their own hero's journey, well, they kind of lost their plot. They did not stop at any time. They kept, and they became like supernovas about to explode at any time, really.
Yeah.
So in many ways, I think that from, strictly from a Thelemic standpoint, there's absolutely nothing bad in general. Our aim is to strive to find the balance, and the balance must be between having nothing and having everything, right? And you really have you always have to understand with yourself, become being honest with yourself and tell yourself, so where am I? Where do I position myself into between the haves and have-nots? Let's put it like that. And you will know then if you need to strive for more, or if you need maybe to rein in a little bit. And that will inform the kind of magical practice that you will do.
Yeah.
I also as I made this point in the book and in the courses I teach, is that there are two fundamental approaches to magic, right? One is what I call sorcery or low magic, and by low magic I don't imply it's not important. It's just that it exists on a horizontal level, and then what I call high magic or theurgy, and again high only because it exists on a vertical level. The two, you need to experience both of them really to be a complete magician, but the horizontal level will teach you how to gain things, like how to gain influence, happiness, well, money, relationships, like everything that people think they can achieve with magic. It's not that simple, by the way. It's possible. It's not that simple. And it's definitely not as simple as all the manifestation gurus, the secret people wanted to be. Like author Mitch Horowitz, which I really like, is a very good writer. Like recently, he put out this new book about, I don't remember the title, unfortunately, but it's about the positive thinkers, right? And I think he is being very, very kind towards certain people, because I do think that a lot of the new thought, a lot of the manifestation gurus, etc., make it sound so easy that you can just think yourself in a better position, and lo and behold, things will happen. I think there needs to be something else there. Let's put it like that. But anyway, that's one way of doing magic. Well, the other way, what we've discussed so far up until this point, really is theurgy or high magic. That magic that tries to to go upwards and try
Mhm.
try to work for pretty much to put yourself into that cocoon we were talking earlier on and force you to that alchemical process of complete transformation, right?
Yeah.
Something that I say to my students is that, like, especially those, I mean, there's been some of them that have been with me for almost 5 years now, and all of these people have went through incredible changes in their lives. And I was telling them, I always told you that this would happen. Like, when we first started, I kind of made a pact with you and say, if you stick with this long enough, you will not be the person you were at the beginning. And the funny bit is that it will almost certainly be different from what you were expecting to be. Because the truth of the matter is that that tether with the divine, with Godhead, it's that truth in ourselves that usually it's so hidden that we cannot see it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Only by engaging with that, onion peeling of the layers we were saying before, you get to see it. And
Yeah.
again, one way of doing that peeling could be by using that low magic or sorcery to put yourself into a better social state, right? A better financial state, because I mean that rent is not going to pay itself. But
Yeah.
that mean I would say that I would never suggest though to just do magic to pay the rent. Do magic to find a good job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's something that it's something that I notice a lot, especially again in recent years, as magic became popular and more, I would say, more accepted to a degree. Uh, a lot of people were selling it as a quick fix to get things, where magic is not quick and will get you things, but often the things you didn't know you needed at
Sure.
first.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Be careful
uh,
what you ask for a little bit,
yeah,
right? I mean,
pretty
like,
much so. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
How does that relate to the true will that you were talking about? Like you peel the onion layers and you find, you said your true will. Is that sort of, I mean, the will of the Godhead reflected through you, or
Mhm.
what is that you find when you look for the true will, and how does that play into magic ultimately?
So the reality of the true will or pure will, because again, in Thelema's central text, Liber Alve Legis, um, which is, in my opinion, it's the book that everybody who's interested in Thelema should read, and they will not understand it at first, but they will know immediately if they feel drawn to it or not. And if they feel drawn to it, they should continue. If not, maybe they should just leave already at that stage. But the point is that in the pretty much all of Thelema is encoded there, and a lot of the things that people see consider it like staples of Thelema are not in there, no, at least not spelled out right. And
Yeah.
and true will is one of them. However, the concept pure will is in there, and I think it's better because
Okay.
true implies there's a false will, and there's all
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
there's a dichotomy there,
A dichotomy. Yeah. Yeah.
sorry. Whereby pure, it speaks of almost like an unfettered, like um, something that just happens, right? Yeah, it's something that it's pure, it exists, and you just slot inside yourself. So to answer your question, that pure will is the will of the Godhead, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is the fact that you, at some point, align yourself with the will of the Godhead. You, at your point, align yourself with the inertia of the universe, right? So instead of constantly fighting towards things that, well, currents that maybe you don't even see, lo and behold, you are in the current. You are the current at that point. And when you were saying, how does this relate with magic? Well, once you've done that, that's when you start doing real magic, because that's when you pretty much you realize that, first of all, I mean, at least that's been my experience. Once you have that, well, a lot of that horizontal low magic sorcery, well, you don't need to do that anymore, because things that you need in your life, they begin to happen naturally. But
Yeah.
remember, this pure will, it's quite a long process to get there, right?
Yeah.
um, there are specific techniques that can be used, and to be fair, this is, it's the same concept as samadhi in yoga, right? It's really the same. So this is not to say that you can only discover your true or pure will with Thelemic rituals. I did true to Thelemic rituals because they worked for me, because they were like I found I was in love with them, as we were saying before. I found joy in doing them, and I love the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
I it could well be that you would have a completely different aesthetic, and you would like something completely different. Again, in the book I'm writing right now, what I'm presenting is pretty much like I'm trying to strip down the technology. So I'm writing like pretty much like a commentary of all the various rituals in Thelema, mainly
Yeah.
Liber 8 and Liber Samek, and say, okay, this is the technology behind. These are the takeaway points that you should take, and then you should go and do your own with your own aesthetics, with your own dressing, if you want. And
Yeah.
incidentally, this is exactly what Crowley says already in One Star Insight, which is one of the foundational documents of the AA, which was the magical order of Aleister Crowley, founded by Aleister Crowley. And AA means Argenteum Astrum.
Mm.
And by the way, Argentum Astrum is the silver star, Latin, and that silver star really is Sirius. So John, we go back to the stars we were saying
Yeah.
before. There's some connection. The star connection is really present, right? Anyway, Crowley in One Star Inside does say, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not verbatim, but say something like, "Nobody can tell you what is the name of your god or the ritual to invoke him. You have to find it yourself." However, these are steps that can get you to the point where you're ready to, well, to do this. All the techniques or the practices, the rituals that I presented in my first book, well, they are the stepping stone, because what you're trying to do at first is to build that cocoon, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that must be like you're building a vessel made of your body of light, so maybe of your physical and subtle bodies,
Yeah.
so that that vessel can be strong enough to contain this fire from heaven that at some point will descend on you. And so that the vessel must be strong enough to contain it, so that eventually can be sealed and you can become one with it. So
Yeah.
this, if you think about it, this is alchemy, right? This is very,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you look at the alchemical process, the alchemists were trying to do the same things, but they were using allegories as with the metals and
Yeah.
with the
Yeah. Yeah.
bytes, etc., etc. Same idea.
Which is sort of interesting given how uh, Jung sort of deconstructed alchemy and said it's psychological in nature, psychological slash spiritual. I mean, and I
Yeah.
think that even he tended in that direction, although he didn't write about it as much as
Oh well,
he.
he did write in the Red Book, right?
Yeah,
If you
well,
read
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The Red Book
definitely.
is a strictly alchemical spiritual text. Famously, I think I'm correct here, but I think that he left a specific note to his foundation that the Red
Mhm.
Book needed to be published many years after his death, because
Yeah,
only at the time of his death, like finally, psychology was being finally accepted, and he knew that if this part of psychology would become immediately evident, people will like the scientific community would just shun it right away, and they do it to this day, right? Like when we speak of the Red Book, a lot of like psychologists will shrug it and will just like try not to discuss it, to the point that Jung is not seen as the best psychology you get nowadays, which for me it's absolutely bonkers, but hey, whatever works, right?
what are we
But
gonna
yeah, I
do?
mean, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Jung was very much more mystic than he was a scientist. Of course he was a scientist, no doubts about it, but I think he was a mystic. I had
yeah,
the pleasure of seeing the original Red Book at the Venice Biennale in 2013,
oh,
alongside the originals of the Thoth Tarot by Aleister Crowley and Lady Free Diaries, and it's massive. This thing was it's huge, right? And
yeah,
and it's so beautifully painted. So imagine the work that went into that. That
yeah,
is a work of a mystic, right?
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
same sort
absolutely.
of incredible. It's divinely inspired by all means, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the aesthetic of all of that and the journey that he went on, and the way he forms a bridge between the sciences and
Yeah.
the sort of mystical approaches. And I think that he's having a revival. Whether or not that means the sciences are ever going to take him as seriously as should be, maybe not. But I think a lot of other philosophies and approaches are valuing his contribution for opening that door.
I mean, I'm very, very happy to hear because, for a long time, I remember that a lot of people in the psychiatric community
Mm,
were very dismissive of Jung because, of course, once you realize that at the very core of the theory of the archetypes, there is an alchemical or Neoplatonic even
mm,
philosophy. People are like, oh, I don't know, I thought we left this behind. But the reality there is that I think that the human thinking is way more complex and allows for many different layers
yeah,
than our often reductionist and secular society wants it to be, right?
sure.
And this is
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
maybe we are having, this big revival of magic. Magic is super rational. People, I
Mm,
don't like to call it irrational,
yeah,
but it is super rational. It goes beyond rationality. Magic
yeah,
works for reasons that I don't think science, proper science, will ever be able to decode. I think we will get closer and closer and closer. We will be able to decode, maybe in strictly like in proper scientific terms, how certain technique works, right? But magic really exists at that liminal stage between art and science. And Crowley himself called magic, the art and science of causing change to occur in accordance with the will, right? And
yeah,
it's very much both, right? And it exists in that the liminality between the two, and it moves between the two.
yeah.
And so it's very hard to try and pinpoint it and say, So that's why that's why I call it super rational, because
Sure.
it's not rational. There's no way around it.
There seems to be a lot of areas in modern society where we're confronting that super rational, and we're
Yeah.
realizing, maybe I'm hoping, and maybe I'm working towards it if I can, the idea that our rationality is a system that we use to explain the world to ourselves, but it doesn't actually reflect reality. It's words
Hmm.
and concepts that give us a way to interact with the world, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the deeper truths. One of the things that it goes on in these discussions a lot, like we're having, and tons of folks are having all over the internet, which is a good sign, that there's a consciousness evolution ongoing right now, and that people talk about a new age, or sort of innate abilities in humans that have been buried for a while may soon be coming to the surface, whether it's the age of Aquarius or the new aeon or whatever terminology you use, that we're coming into a new era, and an era maybe of awakening. um, how do you relate magic to that idea? And do you believe that we are evolving, or are we sort of just, as a species, learning through trial and error like we always have? And this is just where the lessons have ended us up.
I think that we've been evolving from day one, right? I
Yeah,
think that there is like the experience, the human experience is again an experience of engaging with life itself, and that engagement is alchemical in nature. It forces change, it forces evolution. I think that we live in times where we're able to observe it more, and we live in times where we have access to our information can flow so freely that we can discuss it in real time. But I think it's
sure.
always been there. Like I don't think it ever stopped, right?
Yeah,
Even in times that I mean, historians are really, for instance, redefining even the concept of the Dark Ages right now. Like if you go to elementary school, even intermediate school, you're taught that for a time, 800 years, nothing happened. It was just like the Dark Ages, right? And
yeah,
then you
yeah.
realize, well, it's not like that. Like first of all, maybe that was happening in Europe, but if you look at
Yeah,
what
yeah.
was happening in the Middle East, well, lo and behold,
High
all
society.
the
Yeah, yeah,
exactly the society was some beautiful societies. Look in India, etc., etc. So of course.
yeah.
Uh, but it's these are memes, right? Like these are memetics that are forced into our head, and we need to fight them at all the time. So I think that we're constantly evolving, right? I do think that we do encounter as a species some milestones, and like famously, Peter Levenda in his books, in all his books, made the point that all our culture and also our spirituality is a cargo cult, because at some point something must have happened around
Contact
200,000 years
or
ago, something like that. That
yeah,
boom, like we went from being hunter gatherer for millions of years, and we start making cities at some point. What has happened there? And of course, the idea is, have we been visited by something else, or have we unlocked the ability to communicate with something else, and so we brought back information. I think that's definitely possible. But of course, me and Peter, we're very good friends. We've done this course together. We're doing a retreat in Joshua Tree together next year in February. So of course, I agree with his views, obviously, but I also think that something has been happening in recent times, right? As Thelemites, we think that the ushering in of what we call the new Eon, the Eon of the Child or Eon of Horus, happened 120 years ago in 1904, and the concept of eonics in Thelema is it's a bit of a strange concept. It's one of those things that are not present in the Book of the Law, for instance. It's something Crowley worked into Thelema later. And Crowley was famously a member of the Plymouth Brethren, especially the exclusive Brethren. So a sect inside the sect of very specific Christians. And the extreme Brethren, sorry, the exclusive Brethren, were famously, one of them was called Darby. And Darby was this philosopher, well, Christian philosopher, that created what's called dispensationalism. The idea that, through time there are different dispensations, and this dispension means like new prophets that come and refine the message of Jesus Christ. This is very much what we find in Crowley in many ways. Like Crowley changed the terms, changed the names, brings in this term eon, which means period of time, but also brings in with the same way that the Gnostics used it. In Gnosticism, and by the way, Gnosticism is not just one thing; it's an immense and diverse umbrella of different religions and different modalities of thinkings and philosophies. The famous Professor Elaine Pagels, which is one of the most important writer on Gnosticism, she says that we should just stop talking about Gnosticism because there was never one Gnostic religion. But anyway, the concept of eons does come from Gnosticism, especially Valentinian Gnosticism. And in Gnosticism, it's not just a period of time, they're also entities. These entities that bring in new ideas to humanity. Like as these eons succeed, humanity goes through stages of evolution. Then when we look at the Hindu religion, we have the ideas, of course, of the Manvantara, the Kalpas, the Yugas, the periods of time that represent the breeding of Brahma that goes from pralaya to pralaya, from annihilation into creation, and it's continuous, but it is like infinitely long period of times that are separated into different terms. And then again, with each of this period of times coming, changes come, right? I do think that something must have happened in 1904 that has pretty much kick-started a process where we're completely into it right now. I don't think neither me and you will see the end of it because we're still stuck into a human life that lasts 90 years, maybe 100 years if we're very lucky. I think this is going to go. These things will have started 120 years ago. I think it will come to the first fruition in another 400 years or so. Like it needs that time, more or less. But I think we are in time where we will become an event similar to what Peter Levenda states in his books will happen again. And again, this is possibly why there's all this discussion about disclosure and UFOs and UAPs and whatnot. While again, from one side, it's because we have the technology to record it. Now it's very hard to say that you haven't seen anything if it's in your phone. And of course, it's interesting to notice that phenomenon as a way to escape phones very easily. Despite we're all on our phones and we have like pretty much like 4K capabilities. Every time we try to record these things, they will come fuzzy and they're not clear, etc., etc. Right? But it's definitely true that it's impossible to just say you dreamt of it. It's not there. Something is there. Something is seeping through, has been seeping through, and I think we are going to another cargo cult event. Like I don't know if you read Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's Hand.
I have. No, I have.
Let's say that I had some very deeply personal experiences that made me think that that's where we're going. right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I might be completely wrong. It might be just my wishful thinking, because I think that the message of that book is very positive. Of course,
Mhm.
we shouldn't spoiler it, but you all should read it. It's a great book.
Yes, definitely.
Some years ago, Sci-Fi, I think, did like a two episode TV series of that, which was okay. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible.
Hmm.
As usual, the book is much more nuanced, it's much more interesting. But in long story short, the story goes that at some point the aliens do arrive, and they tell us, you know what? We are so much more powerful than you that you're gonna do what we say. But what we say is that just gonna bring Eden on Earth, and you're gonna be the happiest. There's a twist to that that
Yeah,
some
yeah,
people might not like. I think the twist is what we were saying before, right? This idea of moving from unification into dissolution, but it's not a nihilistic dissolution. Oh, I'm gonna become nothing. I'm gonna destroy myself. It's just like going back to the source in many ways. Finally, fully reconnecting with the source, and the source
yeah,
being beyond creation itself. So we only can perceive it as zero, as nothingness, shunyata, void, which is the
yeah,
same idea of the Ein Sof in
yeah.
Kabbalistic terms.
Kaba,
So,
Kabbalah. Yeah,
so
that's fast.
that's what I see pretty much coming. Uh,
Okay, interesting. That's fascinating. I was interested in what you were saying about, I mean, contact, disclosure, and all that. I cover UAPs a lot. I'm fascinated by the subject and UFOs and all of that. I've had Peter on the show and asked him some of these same questions, and he's a great guy. I absolutely adore him.
yeah, he's great.
Um,
Absolutely.
but with Crowley, there was AWAS and Lamb, and those are beings, entities that he contacted, or his wife, I think. My question is, do you think that all the contactees that are coming forward and saying, talking and describing their experiences, are they is are there two different brands of contact going on, one between a metaphysical or interdimensional or spiritual element, and then possibly something more concrete, and some of these metallic gleaming objects that we see that seem like they're physical crafts because they're caught on radar and they do things that a physical craft could be expected to do? Where do you fall on what the UFO is, or is it just a wide variety of things, which explains the you know uh, diversity of experience around them?
Well, there are more things in heaven and earth than your
Yes.
philosophy can dream of, right?
Yes.
Shakespeare never lies. I think that basically what's out there is everything we can think of and everything we cannot think of.
Sure.
I think that pretty much there's not just one type of phenomenon that's contacting us. What's happening, I think that we are becoming more, we've been primed to become more aware that we are part of a much bigger cosmos than we thought at first. And what I think it's happening, since I think we are in that process of, quickening, if you want,
Yeah.
of our
Great word.
understanding.
Yeah.
I think that we are starting to see more of what is out there, and some of it will be of physical nature. Some of it might well be extraterrestrial or cryptoterrestrial, or under the sea. I do say
Yeah.
like USOs now. There's this new term.
Yeah.
So basically, physical based, maybe carbon based, maybe not carbon based, but creatures like me and you. And then there's something else that's coming through, which is something that I like to describe as n-dimensional consciousness. Okay, consciousness that exists outside of our four dimensions.
Mhm.
Consciousness exists outside space and time. Okay, and this consciousness that exists outside space and time is in fact what we in magic called angels or demons or jinns or fairies. Everything that we can, everything you conjure with magic is an n-dimensional consciousness. And even when we talk about angels and demons and we try to how do you say, to classify them and put them into those neat little boxes we love as humans, try to make everything like fit properly, it's just, to me it's very silly, right? I think that some general classifications hold. But again, which seven traditional planets and the energies behind it. So, the moon, the sun, of course, they're not planets, but they're considered planets. And
Yeah.
then the other, Mars, sorry, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Um, Neptune, not Uranus, not Pluto, but Pluto, we don't know exactly what it's anymore. Every year they change. It is either
Yeah.
something, it's with something else. But in general, those seven energies are n-dimensional consciousness that we can interact with. And even them, they exist on n dimensions. So they will come to you as different things. They will come to you as angels. They will come to you as demons. And the idea of angels and demons, they're kind of the same. They're the same thing. It's just that
Sure.
one exists in a sublunary sphere that is into an incarnated world. Like they're closer to us, and
Mhm.
then something that we perceive as angelic, well, they exist a bit further from us. In my perspective, when I say they're the same thing, it's because the way I perceive this consciousness, I perceive them as fractalization of the same consciousness.
Huh.
So depending on uh, which frequency I'm going to hit, they will present themselves as demons, they will present themselves as angels, they will present themselves as something else. Okay. And then you have all the categories of the spirits of this planet, right? That we're not just the only creatures of this planet. We're not just us animals here, and by animals I mean all as animals, like Homo sapiens sapiens, and all our animals, like from the dog over there, which is beautiful,
Yeah, yeah.
to
Little
to
Bonnie.
do anything else, right? There are other types of consciousness that we share this planet with.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it's all of these things at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's tend to
And
be what I think as well.
yeah, and the thing is that, like, I also think that cultural lenses play a major role, and the individual preparation to withstand the contact plays a major role as well. And by this I mean is that, like, if you think if you think more in scientific terms, it's easier that you will see nuts and bolts crafts. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you, like me, tend to have a more magical perspective in life, you maybe will see lights in the skies, or angelic beings, or things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think another thing, another one, maybe a fundamental part of this equation, which is why I always think that everybody who's interested in disclosure in UFOs should become magicians as well, should
Mhm.
work on build, even just going to the very early stages of building your body of light,
Yeah.
because that body of light, remember, that sort of like subtle vessel that would contain the Godhead at some point. Well, it will also work as a sort of interface for these encounters. So the stronger your body of light is, the more positive the encounter will be.
Yeah.
I am absolutely convinced that
Interesting.
yeah, I'm absolutely convinced that pretty much everybody who reports of abductions and abuse from these encounters, they do so because they never prepared for it, right? So
Yeah.
an encounter like this will always be traumatic, because unless you prepared for it, right? Uh, it will always be traumatic because it's the strange that appears in your life. It's the
Yeah.
impossible that presents itself to you, and our brain always kind of try to works to make sure that he has everything under control. So the moment that the strange presents itself, your brain goes into overload. So unless you prepared yourself, and in many ways, unless you're a magician,
Hmm.
you will be traumatized by it. To me, there's no way around it. I mean, famously, even when we read about those who speak of, like, positive contacts, I'm thinking about Chris Bledsoe and the
Hmm.
lady, which is a positive, right? It's a positive
Sure.
contact. Well, I mean, he speaks of it being overwhelming too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you realize that pretty much these things happen to everybody. So you don't have to be a special magician to do it. It will happen to everybody who, I think it happens to everybody who needs it to happen to them,
Yeah.
whether it's positive or it's negative, right? And so being prepared for it will help you withstand the literally like the power of the experience itself. Again, in the way I can try and explain it, and this I mean, I'm talking about my experiences, is that really when you're conjuring this consciousness, this n-dimensional consciousness, what's happening is that you're bringing into you're forcing something that's much bigger, you're forcing it into a much smaller space. What
Yeah.
happens is, even in physics, when you do this, well, there's an excess of energy being released, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is how we split the atoms famously, right? Well, that's kind of the same. And that
Yeah.
it's, of course, I'm talking about energy, which is a wishy-washy term. What is this? We cannot, we're going to prove it. We cannot measure it yet. Maybe it will in some time. Was Reich, right? The guy that was working on the orgone energy. Well,
Yeah.
it was
Wilhelm Reich. Yeah.
William Reich.
Yeah.
He was trying to measure that kind of impossible to explain energy, right? So maybe we'll get that. Tesla was doing the same, famously.
Yeah.
We'll get it at some point. But this is what's happening, right? Like we're calling these things down. These things might well want to come because in my experience, they want to communicate. They want
Mhm.
to. They're curious about this reality as much as we're curious about them. The problem is
Sure.
that when they come, there's a lot of energy being released, and if you're not able to withstand it, you will get burned in a way, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I,
Wow.
I again, I hope that answered your question, but we went places a
No,
little bit with it.
it does. And that's going places is what I actually enjoy. So I appreciate you and your answers. We're at an hour and 15 minutes now. I wanted to round out with we live in an era where spiritual teachings and getting yourself involved in, especially a non-traditional spiritual community, is hard. I have been doing a lot of the work that you're talking about, but only by myself. And I've had some strange things happen that I was surprised by. And I won't necessarily give you any of the gory details, but I think that I've discovered something about the nature of reality for myself, at least. But how do you get further than that? And if you can't, go down to the street corner and find someone who's spiritually advanced who will sit with you and talk with you and help you grow, and say you don't have a whole lot of money and you're confused by all the offerings on the internet about who you should talk to, trying to find a spiritual teacher. How do you foster that kind of relationship and grow more if you don't have the connections to the community, but you really want to try and find a way into this universal experience?
You're touching on a big problem, right? In the sense that um, it's really hard to make sure you're not going mad if you don't have somebody trustworthy that can tell you, you're not going mad. It's fine. You're going through the motions. You're doing it right, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, my experience with the magical community has been really bad in the sense that um, it's always been a mixed bag, right? But when I came back, because I was I discovered Crowley in the 90s. I got initiated in the AA in the late 90s, and then again in the OTO in the late 2000s, right? And then, but in the intervening time, I was like a musician, professional musician. So I kind of like I was doing my practices, but I was not really involved into any community. I was online, but it was
Yeah.
forums and nothing else at the time. Then
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
involved I got involved very much involved in the OTO, which really is a magical community. Like there's in many ways, there's very little magic in the OTO. There's so much more magical community, right? So people can
Sure.
come together and share. So, and unfortunately, as I wrote in my book at the end, right? I say I am not. I'm really suggesting people to fight their need to find a magical community because I don't think it's worth the risk. It's you really the chances that you're gonna end up into a cult, and by cult I don't mean the Branch Davidians or Heaven's Gate. Yeah, I'm not talking about the kind of cults or Scientology, the kind of cults that either empty your bank account or end your life, but like abusive cults of various degrees, right? It's
Sure.
really really possible that will happen. right nowadays.
Yeah.
My experience have been bad. The experience of a lot of other people I know have been terrible as well. I don't know. It might be the zeitgeist. It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
I do think that social media has worsened it, right? So in many ways, social media communities are hard to find as well,
Yeah.
because it's very, very likely that you will find a Discord community that seems okay at first, and then end up being an online cult, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's really, really possible. So what I would suggest you, what I would suggest anybody who might be in that, and again, sorry, I should say also, I also fully understand that nobody can spend the money that even I ask for my courses, right? Which I always try to keep my price as low as possible, but it's very possible that it's not on budget. And I would say that it's not like we live in simple times. Like our worldwide social geopolitical situation is really bad. So I understand that. My suggestion is try to first of all understand what is the flavor you like the most. Is it the Golden Dawn flavor? Is it the Witchcraft flavor? Is it Thelema? Is it something else? Like find your flavor first. And to do
Mhm.
that, I would suggest that you need to read the most diverse, like spend maybe the first 6 months reading across the board, right? Reading, watching YouTube, maybe like lightly treading onto Discord servers, even if I would suggest not to. I would suggest you to stay away from Reddit, to stay away from 4chan. Those are stay away from Twitter. There's no redeeming qualities in those anymore, unfortunately. But I mean, like, try to give yourself a general idea of all, and then you will find which voices, you know, resonate with you the most. And once you
Sure.
find, let's say, once you narrow down to the voice, to the one, or let's say there should be, I would suggest also like not to spread yourself too thin. Like I think it's important at first to find, okay, I like this, I'm gonna pursue this and only this for a while, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
again, if you don't do that, it's almost like, okay, I want to play bass, I want to play guitar, and then you end up, unless you have an innate talent
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
music,
You can't
you're
do
just
both.
gonna
You.
you can do
Yeah.
both, right? But once you find let's say the flavor you like, and maybe you narrow down the voice that speaks to you the most, well, spend some time to see what the person is like, right? And if I can, try to also go through the amount of defamation that is available on the internet right now. What happened, well, something that really has happened in recent years is that since we everybody became almost like a marketplace, like there's been a lot of people that have been actively trying to hurt the character and the reputation of others, because by doing so they would sell, though they thought they would sell more themselves. It's that bad. Okay.
No,
So
yeah,
in
no,
many ways,
absolutely. You see that in the UFO community where you have
yeah, yeah, I mean,
people
absolutely,
whose
absolutely.
whose whole business is to tear down other people so that they get more attention, and
Absolutely, and unfortunately, I guess that's human nature, and that's human nature in late stage capitalism. That's
yes,
that's the hellscape we're living in. So
yeah,
be aware of this, right? Be aware of this
yeah,
thing, right? So in many ways, what I'm telling you is that like you narrow down the practice, the aesthetic, the person, and then approach that person, and you will quickly see if the person is approachable or not. And I'm telling you this because I do think that finding a tutor is important, right?
yeah,
And it could be that the person you find, they say, like, I'm not interested. I don't do this, or they will tell you, I only do this, and maybe you cannot afford it, right?
yeah,
Or maybe they would say, no, no, that's fine. I want to let's talk. Let's have a chat. Usually, people that don't charge anything are those who want you to join their order, which might be perfectly fine for you.
yeah,
I would not suggest it, right? I moved away from the order structure because for the reasons we discussed, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But if you end up finding that maybe the flavor, the person that you like is somebody that has a price tag attached to their teaching, find out if that price tag is acceptable for you, and if it is, well, you ask yourself, is this something I want to do, or not? Like like if it's something you want to do, you'll find the money. That's the reality of that. I would also suggest that none of the people I know that are serious will ever ask you more than a couple of hundreds for a full course or things like that, right?
yeah, yeah,
When you see people, if you see people starting charging you like thousands and thousands of pounds, then you're moving into the life coach, Hollywood style life coach community, which is another cesspit of
Yeah.
horribleness that we're not going to discuss right now. But I
Yeah.
think this is my, these are my suggestions. I'm sorry that they're maybe not very very comforting, but that's the truth. That's the reality. Like, we are living in times where the bubble has burst. Like, we are at the very tail end of this magical revival that the last 6 years, more or less. So a lot of general interest is fading, and with it, a lot of offerings are fading as well, and so they're
Yeah. Yeah.
disappearing. It could well be that, I mean, it could well be that even I will stop doing things online, because I must say, like, my courses have been, my offerings has been very successful,
Hmm.
but I've seen a downward trend, because, again, people don't have time or money anymore, and I understand it
Yeah.
completely, right? So
Yeah.
it could well be that in a year's time, well, lo and behold, you will never, not even be able to pay for it, because there will be no options anymore, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, like I say, like, try to narrow down, and then maybe approach the person that you find interesting, and see what they have to say. Like,
Okay.
again, like, personally, I always try to answer every email I get. I get a lot of strange emails. Like, I just posted once today on Twitter, and man, let me tell you, the emails I get. But I'm not just the only one.
Sure.
Everybody with a public face
Yeah.
in this world, you do attract strange people. So if you present yourself in, I wouldn't say in a nice way, just present yourself as a normal person, which is honestly seeking, you will get a reply. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, excellent, sir. Thank you very much for taking the time out. I will read your book, and I will maybe ask you back after I do that if that's something that you would be willing to consider in a while.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. In at the end of the book, there's a QR code that give you free access to the general part of my community, where I'm always there. I always, like, interact there, and I'm very happy to answer any question. So please get in touch. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you very much, James.